sent 4 disaster mortuary operational response teams to New York and 3 to the greater Washington area. We're also in the process of shipping a great deal of emergency medical supplies to New York City with the help of the Centers for Disease Control. In short, we're making the full force of the Department of Health and Human Services, both its resources and medical expertise available to the areas that need our assistance. We've also this afternoon activated the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, which consists of approximately 6,000 health professionals. We also are giving backup assistance to the 500-bed ship Comfort for the United States Navy. Americans all over are calling up and asking what they can do. The best thing they can do is respond to this great call by volunteering to give blood. We need Americans to continue to answer that call. No matter where you live, please do your civic duty and assist us by donating blood. It is our primary job is to make sure Americans harmed by this tragedy get the help that they need. We will remain in constant contact with the governors, the mayors, public health officials, and other local officials to make sure that all their needs are being met. It is a sad day, but America and all of its citizens certainly share tonight in the grief that it's been caused. And as the President and everybody in his administration have said, we, the government, will continue to operate and continue to provide the services to all Americans.
One of the most cherished freedoms is the freedom of movement, the ability to move freely and safely. But today that freedom was attacked. But we will restore that freedom throughout the national transportation system as soon as possible, and we will restore the highest possible degree of service. These terrorist acts are designed to steal the confidence of Americans. We will restore that confidence. We have already taken some first steps as a precaution.
And so while this is going on at the White House, this is what's happening at the Capitol of the United States. Dinah Hassert, the Speaker of the House, has begun talking as congressmen and senators gather.
One thing that happens here in this place is when American suffers and when people perpetrate acts against this country, we as a Congress and as a government stand united, and we stand together. Senators and House members, Democrats and Republicans will stand shoulder to shoulder perpetrated on this nation. We will stand together to make sure that those who have brought forth this evil deed will pay the price. We're not sure who this is yet. But we have our suspicions. And when that is justified and when those suspicions are justified, we will act. We will stand with the President, we will stand with this government, and we will stand as Americans together through this time. Thank you.
Now on the steps of the Capitol, Tom Dasher, the Senate Majority Leader.
Today's despicable acts were an assault on our people and on our freedom. As the representatives of the people, we are here to declare that our resolve has not been weakened by these horrific and cowardly acts. Congress will convene tomorrow. And we will speak with one voice to condemn these attacks, to comfort the victims and their families, to commit our full support to the effort to bring those responsible to justice. We, Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, stand strongly united behind the President and will work together to ensure that the full resources of the government are brought to bear in these efforts. Our heartfelt thoughts and our fervent prayers are with the injured and the families of those who have been lost.
We know as a nation, as we said, our thoughts and prayers are with those families and those injured and those who are the casualties of today's attack. We also remember those thousands of people who are rescue workers. We ask now that we all bow our heads in a moment of silence and remembrance. Thank you.
Live from Washington on the steps of the Capitol of the United States, literally hundreds of members of Congress. We can't say that every member of Congress in the House and Senate was there, but hundreds were there in a show of solidarity and support, a show of unity in the face of a sneak attack, the second in the lifetime of many of us, a sneak attack on the United States, this time by the shadowy personages who are part of the terrorism operation. There are a number of terrorism operations in the world. Osama bin Laden has been the focal point since 1998 of U.S. intelligence suspicions, but we've said it before, we repeat it without apology. No one knows who is responsible for these dastardly acts today. 3 of the World Trade Center buildings, the 2 Twin Towers and Building 7, destroyed at the World Trade Center. The Pentagon, dead, wounded, and destruction there. Now, coverage of the attack on America continues, including President Bush's address shortly, so stay right here with us.
And we're going to keep monitoring CBS News' continuing coverage of today's attack on America. Hello, I'm Ernie Anastas.
I'm Angela Ray. Shortly before 9 this morning, a passenger jet crashed into the World Trade Center.
And it touched off a chain reaction of events that would result in 4 downed planes. The collapse of both World Trade Center towers, along with Trade Center Building 7.
That attack didn't end there. One section of the Pentagon was also taken out.
CBS 2 has comprehensive team coverage of today's disastrous events.
Here's the latest information we have on today's massive and devastating terrorist attack. Explosions are lighting up the dark skies over Kabul, Afghanistan. The bombing began sometime around 2:30 in the morning and came in rapid succession in the vicinity of the airport. Now, large plumes of smoke and raging fires dot the horizon. That's right now. CNN is reporting that the rebel group Northern Alliance has claimed responsibility for the attack. It is believed that terrorist Osama bin Laden lives in that country. 8 hours after the first terrorist attacks on Lower Manhattan, fire was still raging at 7 World Trade Center, eventually causing that building's collapse around 5:20 this evening. The building was evacuated at the time. Mayor Giuliani announced this evening that all of Manhattan below 14th Street will remain closed tomorrow. Initial reports have 600 people undergoing treatment at area hospitals, with 150 in critical condition. Another 2,000 walking wounded, as they are being called, were taken to Liberty State Park in New Jersey for treatment. Mayor Giuliani says it may take 2 days before a final figure of the dead and the injured is known. President Bush is back at the White House this evening after beginning his day at a Sarasota, Florida elementary school. Earlier today, Bush and congressional leaders were taken to secure locations, and the government evacuated federal buildings across the Capitol. The government has also sent out search and rescue teams to New York and called in volunteer doctors and nurses. President Bush is expected to address the nation at or before 9 o'clock.
Okay, that is the latest that we have right now, and a lot happened today very quickly from Lower Manhattan to the Pentagon to Pennsylvania. Let's try to put the day's tumultuous events in a chronological order. CBS 2's Hazel Sanchez brings us a timeline of what happened today. Hazel.
It was just before 9 o'clock this morning. The workday was getting underway in Lower Manhattan when what would become the nation's most horrific terrorist attack began. American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston, bound for L.A., crashes into Tower Number 1 of the World Trade Center. 92 people were on board. Just 18 minutes later, before reality could set in, the unimaginable. A second plane, American Airlines Flight 77 from D.C., bound for L.A., crashes into Tower 2. 64 were on board. Minutes later, President Bush in Sarasota, Florida, calls the crash an apparent terrorist attack, pledging the full force of the U.S. government will track down those responsible. Federal buildings are evacuated around the country. Authorities are on alert coast to coast. About 40 minutes after the towers were struck, the nation learns that terrorism will spread beyond Manhattan. An aircraft crashes into the Pentagon. One side of the structure collapses in the fiery blaze. Quick to respond, the Federal Aviation Administration shuts down all air traffic nationwide. Shortly after 10, as the rescue efforts continue, Tower Number 2 collapses. Around the same time, United Airlines Flight 93 from Newark bound for San Francisco crashes near Pittsburgh. And United also confirms a second plane, Flight 175, crashing into an unknown location on its way from Boston to L.A. 110 people on board those aircraft. Then at 10:28, the second tower collapses, and Manhattan's skyline changes forever, as do the lives of an entire nation.
And the Federal Emergency Management Agency has sent nearly 600 rescue specialists to the World Trade Center. They are trained in finding victims in disastrous events. We have guided missile cruisers on their way here, as well as 2 aircraft carriers to deal with any air or sea threats. What many of us have witnessed today is terrorism as we've never seen before, and even some 10 hours after the fact, we struggle to grasp the reality of all of it. Angela. I don't know if we can. Hazel, thank you. And the outside of the World Trade Center has been compared to a war zone. As we've been saying, Lower Manhattan is shut down with buildings south of Canal evacuated as a precaution. CBS 2 reporter David Diaz is live at the scene with the latest on a still very active scene there. David.
Anyway, the situation happened.
Well,
holy shit! What is it? What just went down?
It was more than 8.5 hours after the initial shock of terror that yet another skyscraper, World Trade Center number 7, the site of the city's emergency operations center, which was weakened by hours of flame, finally collapsed. By then, dozens of other police and fire and ambulance departments had joined the battle. But the reinforcements could not save the Twin Towers that fell victim to suicidal hijacked planes. And even search crews with dogs had to await the third collapse before they could begin to search for survivors and for the bodies of the dead inside the crumpled towers. On the streets of Lower Manhattan, sirens repeatedly pierced the otherwise eerie silence. Crowds gathered in knots around cars with their radios blaring the devastating news.
There's been a lot of other things happening in Washington, a state of emergency basically there.
Among the listeners, people still shocked by the horror of what they had experienced.
There's an explosion. We're on the support floor, which is a basement. Guy came in running. All his skin was out of his body. Oh my God. All his skin was out of his body. We took him out. We ran out. We heard a lot of rumbling. I went back in. There was a lot of smoke. We went up by the stairs with the Port Authority police to start rescuing people. A lot of people were coming out. But there was a lot of people that stayed there. We brought a lot of people on wheelchairs. wheelchairs and a lot of people on gurneys, all people that couldn't make it.
And tonight here in Lower Manhattan, one thing that everyone, whether it be emergency personnel, the civilians who've been evacuated from their buildings, all are keenly aware of, and that is that in and around those buildings that collapsed, certainly World Trade Towers 1 and 2, there were people inside and outside. Not only there were workers going to the buildings, working in the buildings, but also hundreds of emergency personnel, New York City firefighters and police officers that were below those buildings when they collapsed and inside those buildings when they collapsed, trying to come to the rescue of the people who were inside. All of those possibly dead tonight. That's the fear that everyone is living with here tonight, where we're live in Lower Manhattan. I'm David Diaz, CBS 2.
David, thank you for your report tonight. And still more devastation followed at the World Trade Center hours after the Twin Towers collapsed. The adjoining building at 7 World Trade Center suffered heavy damage when the tower above it collapsed. Well, just before 5:30 this afternoon, it too crumbled, pancaking almost like a precision implosion. Ironically, the building had housed the city's emergency management office, which relocated before that collapse.
A makeshift meeting point for ambulances and other emergency vehicles has been set up in a parking lot at Shea Stadium. Jennifer McLogan is in Willets Point with the story.
From Shea Stadium, a staging area tonight for medics and ambulances from Long Island standing by if and when needed. Over our shoulder, the evening dusk and sunset marred by the smoke from the collapsed tower, still visible even here in the shadow of the stadium and the U.S. Tennis Center. Ambulance volunteers are gathering for a moment of silence to talk, to pray together. Some had come here from the closed airports, LaGuardia and Kennedy, where in the name of national security, terminals were emptied, passengers removed from their aircraft as SWAT teams and canines swept through buildings and planes.
Okay, we are continuing our coverage right now. CBS 2 reporter Whitney Casey is live on the scene at St. Vincent's Hospital, where medical teams are working at a very frantic pace to treat the wounded. Whitney, you've been there all day long covering the story for us. What do you have right now? What's the latest?
Well, right now it is a steady stream of ambulance, as you can see behind me, just coming here. But as Governor Pataki said, the best. If you look behind me, you see the strength of New York. Here at St. Vincent, these doctors have been here all day since 9 o'clock, out here on the streets, just waiting for the ambulance to come here and take the injured. Now, right now, the tally is 320, 55 in critical and 3 dead. We have 45 emergency workers. Most of them have been taken here because it is the closest trauma center to the World Trade Center. Now, joining me now is Lenny Backelchuk. He's one of the main doctors that have been working all day here. You said, although it's a frenetic scene, it's been very calm inside. You guys have kept your calm and your composure.
Right, absolutely. Initially, nobody could really believe that this happened. We went outside, we took a look at the World Trade Center ourselves, and then we started getting organized. Little by little, people came down from other parts of the hospital, administrative personnel, and for example, I called the pharmacy. We arranged for the pharmacy to move itself into the emergency room, and the whole process of reorganizing the hospital, moving patients out of the hospital that were still admitted but that could go home, moving patients out of intensive care units that could go to regular floors, that whole kind of process to make space for people.
Now, initially there were a lot of critical injuries because there were rescue workers that were able to get in closer to the World Trade Center.
Right.
But when the second tower came down, you said most of the rescue workers were out and they couldn't get to the people. But now we're starting to see, and later on through the night, we may see a lot more severe injuries.
Exactly, that's what we're expecting. Initially, we saw our most severe cases came in early in the morning, starting from about 9:30. We saw severe burns on the body. We saw crush injuries, mostly inhalational and burn-related injuries, heat-related injuries at that time.
Now, they said now Building 7, there was a triage near there. When that went down, it became a hot zone again. They are still working on getting some of the debris, some of the dust out of the way so that they can find what's underneath there. And that's why there's been somewhat of a lull here right now for the past hour, right?
Exactly. We expect that as the workers can get back into the buildings or into what's left of the buildings, we expect that they'll be bringing people in.
You guys are prepared? Your stamina is up?
We're absolutely prepared. We have new people actually coming on in the next hour or so, and I'll be going home later on in the evening, and I'll be back in the morning. And one of the attending physicians that's coming in later is actually sleeping right now in my bed in my house because he was here all night last night.
A real team effort, just like Pataki said. You see the strength of the New Yorkers right here.
Yeah, we've actually had people bringing us food from all over. We've had Starbucks coffee bringing us food, coffee, water all day long. We've even had local people cooking and making sandwiches and bringing them in. It's been incredible. People offering to give blood, and doctors calling and nurses calling from all over this whole tri-state area offering their help.
Well, let me let you get back in there so you can continue hard at work. Thank you so much, and thanks all of New York. Thanks you guys in there, I'm sure. Thank you. Take care. Now let me give you some of those numbers again. As I said earlier, 320 are in here right now, 55 in critical, and again, sadly and tragically, 3 are dead tonight here at St. Vincent's. Reporting live, Whitney Casey, CBS 2.
And as we heard, thank you, Whitney. People everywhere pulling together, trying to help out during this time of crisis.
Yes, that's what being a New Yorker is all about.
Yes.
Joining us on the phone right now is police officer Sam Esposito. He was in the midst of all of this today, and right now he's in a hospital bed getting treated for some injuries. First of all, thank you for joining us. We hope you're doing okay. Tell us about your injuries.
I have a busted kneecap on my right foot, and I have something wrong with my wrist. They just casted it up now, and I have some back injuries that I got when the building exploded.
Tell me exactly, where were you at the time of the explosion?
Well, there was actually, when the explosion happened, I thought I was on the 2nd floor, but the fire department, when they found me, they said I was on the 5th floor. So we were on the 5th floor canvassing the floor because we kept hearing voices and people yelling, you know, help me, and we were trying to locate the voices, and you just couldn't. It was just so dark and there was so much soot, you just really couldn't find them.
Officer Esposito, at the time of impact, would you tell us exactly what you felt, what went on?
It felt like an earthquake. It felt like the ground from under you was just going to break open and the whole building was just going to cave in. And what ended up happening was the outer part of the inside of the building stayed intact, and the center floors just caved down. They just went right through. And all you do is just see a hole right through the center of the building, and the outside perimeter of the inside was just there, and that was all that was left. And you hear the voices, and the people are just, you just feel helpless. There's just really nothing, there's nothing you can do. You just try so hard, and there's nothing you can do.
So how did your knee actually get busted, and your wrist and in your back? How did it actually happen? Were you trying to pull someone to safety? Did something fall on you?
When there was I believe, from what I understand, the fireman said that the street collapsed on the outside of the building, and when the street collapsed, there was an explosion which threw me. And it must have threw me across the room, and I ended up going unconscious. And I don't know how long I was unconscious for, but I heard the firemen, and you can hear the firemen like faintly through the noise and everything, and they happened to see me. If the firemen didn't see me, I wouldn't have got out in the building because you couldn't see, you couldn't find an exit, you couldn't find the stairs, you couldn't find nothing. There was no way that you can get out of the building from the position that we were at on your own, unless you were brought to safety by somebody at that point.
Officer Esposito, I want to thank you for the job you did today, and all the other police officers. I am so sorry you were injured. I'm glad that your injuries, though, are not life-threatening, and we certainly do appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us. Thank you so much.
Well,
we wish you the best.
And my prayers go out to all of the people out there that are helping, because nobody really has any idea of how emotionally straining this is going to be for most of us for the rest of our life.
You are so right. Thank you so much, sir.
So many brave people out there really doing their job. We need to get more information right now on the police situation. Dana Tyler is standing by in the CBS 2 Information Newsroom with more on that for us. Dana.
Ernie and Angela, word just in from the Associated Press. A NYPD source says that 78 police officers are missing at this point. Also, the first estimate of dead victims in the World Trade Center collapse is coming in. A vice president with the New York City Firefighters Union says half of the 400 firefighters who first reached the scene may be dead. Mike Carter is his name. He says, quote, "We have entire companies that are just missing." He says, "We're going to have to bury a lot of people." And along that same storyline, Cardinal Edward Egan, who administered last rites to a dozen victims, said the firefighters and police were, quote, "dead in great numbers." So we are, as the evening continues here, learning more about those who were victims to this great tragedy. Also, you know, during this day, with so many people working in those buildings, parents working in those buildings, school children, imagine the day for them, kids whose parents did not come home yet, and we hope yet is what we want to say there. Schools in northern New Jersey are staying open late, so children have a place to stay as their parents are located. And in Bayonne, counselors, as in many parts of our area, counselors are assigned to schools to help children cope with the shock. New York City schools, again, closed tomorrow, and other school systems as well. I'll go back to you, Ernie and Angela.
All right, thank you, Dana. In a short while, we will also be talking with a child psychologist who will help us really deal with the problem, particularly with the children and how they are affected. We still have more to report to you right now. Of course, President Bush is back at the White House tonight after he put the U.S. military on high alert today. The president's return to Washington had been postponed. With a fighter jet escort, he flew to the highly secure headquarters of the Strategic Air Command in Omaha, Nebraska. That's the country's war nerve center. Earlier, at another military base in Louisiana, Mr. Bush pledged to hunt down those who committed today's madness. Listen. The president also plans to speak to the nation tonight at around 8:30. Of course, CBS 2 will carry his speech live.
And Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat is sending his condolences to the American people for what he calls a terrible act. Arafat had been in a meeting with his top advisors when he came out to condemn the attacks.
And despite Arafat's expression of horror at the attacks, many Palestinians are celebrating them. Thousands of Palestinian men, women, and children danced in the streets in Jerusalem and the West Bank after hearing about the plane crashes here in the U.S. The demonstrators cheered and they chanted, "God is great," while shopkeepers passed out cakes and candy.
And as the Twin Towers came crumbling down, transportation into and out of Manhattan came to a virtual standstill. Tens of thousands of people set out on foot across city bridges in an attempt to get home. CBS 2 reporter Kirsten Cole has that part of the story.
The terrorist attack on New York has left a stunned carnage in its wake. As survivors try to flee the explosions, they find themselves with one option: to walk out. Bridges, tunnels, and trains have all been shut down, so those who can left the island on foot.
I saw people, I don't know how they came over the bridge, but completely covered in soot, just walking like in a daze. And then the streets were crazy.
This mass exodus into Brooklyn lasted well into the day until subways started running again mid-afternoon. But everywhere, people are coping with the death and destruction. Father Leo is administering last rites in Brooklyn.
Well, both of them were unconscious in the sense, but I was there to minister a little bit in the sense that they were Catholic, and you just pray along with them. It's more of a presence more than anything else.
And doctors at Long Island College Hospital are working under a state of emergency.
All kinds of trauma has come in.
Describe what you're seeing.
Burns, broken bones.
And while dealing with disaster inside the ER, they're also waiting for more to come. And now that the initial wave of victims has been treated, places like Long Island College Hospital are waiting for the next wave, those who will be pulled from the rubble this evening. In Cobble Hill, I'm Kirsten Cole, CBS 2.
All right, thank you very much.
Michael Oluni is joining us now to tell us a little more about the history of the World Trade Center, a most incredible building that is no more.
That's so true, Angela. The Twin Towers had stood over Lower Manhattan for the last 25 years. They had become a symbol of the city's success, all that was possible in America. But they had also become an irresistible target for terrorists, a target for all those who hate everything that America stands for. We have a piece on that we'll be bringing to you in a few minutes, but just an incredible day, Angela. Just the sadness. You talk to people today and they just can't comprehend, they can't get their arms around this story.
I think one of the things that we were talking about all day long, I heard you say it, and many people, that this is really surreal.
Yes.
You can't imagine. It almost looks like animation, if you will, like this is a movie. You just can't believe that this actually happened here before our very eyes.
And I think the mayor said it. We all either know someone or know someone who knows someone who works in the World Trade Center. And I know I called a friend to make sure her friend was fine, and thank God he was.
Yeah, I took a walk a few minutes ago just to get a break and walked outside. It is completely empty at 57th and 10th. Nobody on the street. And no cars, but we have that package we want to go to you now. This is a look back at the history of the World Trade Center. There is an empty, aching hole in the New York City skyline. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center are gone, wiped away in the worst act of terror to hit America. The towers, each 110 stories of gleaming glass and steel, had become part of New York's identity, symbols of an engineering marvel, of capitalism, of America.
An estimated 50,000 people worked in the towers, and another 90,000 passed through each day as visitors, many coming to visit the observation deck for a bird's-eye view of the city. It was all destroyed in under 2 hours. It happened before, on that terrible day in February 1993, when a suicide bomber tried to blow up the towers by detonating a truck bomb in an underground garage, blasting a crater half the size of a football field beneath the towers. 6 people were killed and more than 1,000 injured. But on that day, the towers kept standing. The 93 bombing changed America. It brought terrorism home, and it shattered the country's sense of security. Soon, parts of the city became fortified as prosecutors brought cases against terrorists accused of plotting other attacks against landmarks here in New York, against U.S. embassies in Africa, and against American citizens around the world. The Twin Towers were first imagined in the early 1960s as part of an urban renewal project. The first building in the $1.2 billion complex opened in 1970. The towers were completed 6 years later, and they were immense in every detail: 43,000 windows, 99 elevators, and each 1,350 feet tall. For a time, they were the tallest buildings in the world, and until this morning, they had been the tallest buildings in New York City. What the 1993 bombing showed was how the towers had been designed to be especially strong, using load-bearing steel walls rather than the steel cage construction typically used in modern skyscrapers. The 16-acre complex was finished in 1988, and it became an international hub for business, home to more than 1,200 companies, many of them involved in international trade. Now, as the smoke drifts across a bright blue, empty sky, a wounded city tries to understand the unthinkable.
And in talking to people today out in the street, here in the newsroom, over the phone, it seems that we all know someone who worked in the World Trade Center, and now so many of us are desperate for information on the fate of our friends and our loved ones. And as that information comes out, we will be here to bring it to you. Ernie, Angela?
Okay.
Of course, the problem right now is that there are so many people who are still unaccounted for, and the efforts are continuing there. That we are told, of course, that in order to get inside and to deal with that problem, those fires have to subside, have to be under control. Not happening as of yet. But as you know, and you can tell us more, there's a lot of need out there, especially blood.
Well, the Red Cross was saying today they have an urgent need for type O negative blood, and they need that so much because that's the universal donor blood. But when we spoke to someone from the Red Cross later today, they said that they were okay for now, but the next few days they were going to be in a much greater need for that. So over the next few days, if people can take the time out to donate blood, that would be greatly appreciated.
And actually, I understand New Yorkers have been going out in droves today, so much so that they're having to be turned away because, you know,
too many. If you have O negative, you should really make a point of trying to donate blood.
Michael, thank you so much.
Okay, we want more right now. Marcia Kramer is standing by at an undisclosed location. She has been following the mayor and getting more information. The mayor held a news conference earlier tonight, talked about how schools would be closed tomorrow and that he urged people, if they could stay home tomorrow, to do that, in fact. Marcia, I'm sure you have a lot more to tell us. Let's go to you right now.
Well, actually, I've been standing out here in this undisclosed location where the mayor has set up a command center, and I have to tell you it's been pretty grim, because what we've seen now seems to be a new development in how they're going to be rescuing workers. For the last half hour, 45 minutes, have been watching a procession of heavy construction trucks being rushed to the scene of the World Trade Center. So now it looks like what they're going to be doing is using these heavy bulldozers and other things to go through the rubble and try to find out if there are any survivors or any bodies left to be pulled out. It's a very grim task, and I can tell you, I can see the World Trade Center from here. I can still see billowing black smoke filling the night sky, and I can still hear the sirens as more and more ambulances and now heavy construction equipment are on their way. When Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki held their press conference earlier, they were also joined by the head of the New York office of the FBI. Right now, the FBI is basically chomping at the bit to get to the crime scene, because what they want to recover right now are the black boxes that were on those planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. Apparently, there were conversations communications from the terrorists or some people in the cockpit radioing that the plane had been hijacked. They want to know what was said. They want to hear who said it. They want to hear the voices of the people in the cockpit as they were piloting the plane into the World Trade Center. Actually, I should say planes into the World Trade Center. Again, the FBI is going to be bringing its special teams in to look for the black boxes, and they're going to bring in the NTSB to try to reconstruct any remnants of the plane to see exactly what was going on. We also have some grim news to report. Apparently at least 50 to 100 police officers and firemen have been reported missing. We know that at least 4 cops have been killed. We also know that the chief police surgeon has been seriously injured with internal injuries. Yes, in fact, schools are going to be closed tomorrow, but principals and teachers are going to be asked to report so they can develop programs to help the kids deal with grieving and deal with this tragedy. So teachers and principals will be reporting. Teachers will not. They're also asking people if they don't have to come into the city to treat it as a snow day. Stay out of the city because it's going to be very difficult to travel in the city, especially in Lower Manhattan. They're going to close off all of Lower Manhattan, and 14th Street North is going to be only used for emergency vehicles. Schools, as I said, are closed. The stock exchange is closed. Now here's something that's really very important. They're asking emergency people, health people, nurses, and doctors to call in if they can offer their services. If you are a health professional, you are asked to call 1-800-628-0193. Again, if you're a health professional and you can volunteer your services, call 1-800-628-0193. And if you're a doctor, call 518-431-7600. Reporting live from someplace in Manhattan, I'm Marcia Kramer, CBS 2.
Marcia, as you know, this is a very moving story right now. We have been reporting various events taking place. For example, all buildings south of Canal Street have been evacuated tonight for precautionary measures. And there are other things happening. And I'm wondering if the mayor or Governor Pataki will be coming on the air a little bit later for some updates.
Well, the mayor and governor say they're going to hold a press conference around 10 o'clock, but the message that they're trying to get out, and this is a very important message, is that New York will be here tomorrow, it will be here the next day, New York will be here forever. New Yorkers are strong, we're not going to take this lying down, and Mayor Giuliani said that he knows that the United States government will find the people responsible and will bring them to justice. But one more caution, he doesn't want New Yorkers to take justice into their own hands and to go after people who live in this city, because he say people who live here are not to blame. Ernie?
Thank you very much, Marcia, for your report tonight. Okay, Angela, we have another interview right now with Senator Chuck Schumer.
That's right. Senator Schumer, thank you for joining us this evening. Your thoughts on what's happened?
Well, I have a whole bunch. I understand the anxiety of tens of thousands of New York families right now who cannot find their loved ones. I went through this morning myself. My daughter goes to high school, Stuyvesant High School, which is in the shadow of the World Trade Center, and thank God we found her, and she's safe and sound, but I know the agony that people are going through.
Have you been hearing from your constituency today?
Yes, we've been hearing from people. If I can get it, we have a phone number that people can call if they have someone missing. That phone number, and maybe you can post it, is 1-800-331-0075. From what we've been able to ascertain, many of the lower floors of the World Trade Center were successfully evacuated. We've heard of people on the 60s, 70s, and even low 80s floors who are safe and sound. So there is some hope, but we're saying a lot of prayers. I did also speak to the president. He called me several hours ago in a gracious move, and he asked me to assure all New Yorkers that the federal government would stand behind New York in every way, with rescue, with recovery, with the kind of help we're going to need on into not the next weeks or months, but next years to deal with the devastation. And he also wanted to assure New Yorkers that he would go after these terrorists and find out who did this and make them pay an awful price and redouble our efforts so that we do more in the future. I think we've been lax in terms of fighting terrorism. We have countries like Iran and Iraq and Syria who do it on a daily basis, and we don't do enough about them, and we need the help of the Europeans to do it as well.
Senator, while you're on that, as you know, there had been reports earlier about a possible U.S. attack on Afghanistan, but a senior U.S. official tonight says that is not a U.S. strike. I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about that from your vantage point.
Yes, I mean, look, we know that bin Laden is somebody who has aimed terrorism and has the blood of many Americans on his hands, and while they haven't made a definitive conclusion, signs point to him as the person who did this. We'll know a lot more shortly. But we've let this man, and we've let the Afghanistan Taliban regime keep him there. And we can't do that anymore. You know, technology, it's no longer, this was like a 21st century Pearl Harbor.
Right.
It, you know, it's different in that it's not a country but a group. And they aim at civilians, not at military targets, which are much better protected. But it's the same kind of violation of the United States, our people, our honor, our sanctity.
Senator Schumer, you are in Washington, D.C. right now, correct?
I'm trying to get to New York. I just can't yet. And, you know, I can be on a plane, but I would take the place of a rescue worker. And I want to wait till they get up here.
Yeah, what's the mood in D.C.? I mean, the Pentagon.
Everyone is shaken. The only good that can come out of this, the partisanship which has been so endemic in Washington, seems to be gone. I've had meetings with my colleagues and hugs, and, you know, everyone assures us that, A, we're going to do all we can for New York, and B, we're going to unite behind the president in terms of the actions that have to be taken. And I say that as a Democrat who has not always agreed with President Bush, but like after Pearl Harbor, the whole country has to unite.
Okay, Senator Chuck Schumer, thank you very much for joining us live from Washington tonight with your assessment of what's been going on here all day, and of course what's ahead for the next couple of days. Thank you, Senator Schumer.
Thank you.
And we're going to join the junior senator from New York, Hillary Rodham Clinton. We understand she's speaking live. Okay, we don't have that yet. When we do, we'll bring it to you. In the meantime, now we're going to take you out to St. Vincent's Hospital in Whitney, Casey. Whitney.
Well, that's right. Out here tonight, as you can see, the governor has been here, the mayor has been here, the police commissioner. They all have said just what you see behind me is the strength of New York. Hundreds of emergency workers, nurses, doctors out here all day since 9 o'clock this morning, waiting on emergency vehicles, pulling up here, taking care of the wounded, the sick, the injured, anyone who is showing up here, taking blood. There have been 350 people that have come here all day donating blood. New Yorkers are very much bonding together here tonight. The numbers we have here, 320 now here at St. Vincent's, 55 in critical condition, and 3 are dead. Now, because this is so close, the closest trauma center to the World Trade Center, we've had 45 emergency workers that have been admitted here. Mostly minor injuries, are telling us, cornea abrasions because of all of that glass and soot in the air there. They've had to come here. Now, Mayor Giuliani ordered some goggles for the rest of the workers there. About an hour ago, there was a huge lull here because we're told that after Tower 7 went down, that a lot of people were in the area, but they couldn't reach anyone because of all that was going on there. And now they said that the smoke is cleared and some of the debris and dust is cleared, that they are down there pulling bodies out, and that we will see a lot more going on here at St. Vincent's, unfortunately, later into the night. We will certainly keep you updated, but again, those numbers, sadly, 320 tonight here, 55 in critical condition, 3 dead. There have been some that have been treated, only about a dozen, and sent home. Now, my colleague Rose Walia has been at Bellevue, the other trauma center that is closest to the World Trade Center, that has been taking, and she files this report.
It was obvious it was under attack.
And when the attack was over, thousands lay injured, and a symbol of might recognized throughout the world, destroyed forever. In the morning hours, the FDR was shut down to motorists to allow emergency vehicles to respond quickly. Then the ambulances poured into hospitals throughout New York. Hundreds were treated for critical injuries, broken bones, and others were dead on arrival. The number killed, though, still unknown, and hospital officials expect the worst is yet to come.
We're going to see probably very, very critical patients with tremendous crush injuries, tremendous traumatic injuries, as they explore the area and find people in this disastrous place.
We really need your help, though. We need your blood. As word of the catastrophe reached the public, throngs of residents lined up to donate their blood.
You have to be realistic, and you got to let cops and firemen do their job, and as an individual, this is probably the best thing I can do and just stay out of the way and just give blood.
But by 4 this afternoon, donors were being turned away because so many turned out to do what they could to help.
They are stocked completely here. They've got no more room to store blood, so come back tomorrow.
Considering the scale of the disaster, hospital officials say they have dealt with the situation well. In addition to patients going to hospitals, many doctors, nurses, and other staff members were transported to the scene itself to aid victims because those victims could not be removed. And officials say they're not exactly sure when they'll stop helping victims through their emotional and physical trauma. Rose Walia, CBS 2.
All right, of course, Rose, her report, and also Whitney Casey talking about how many of the hospitals in New York basically turned into trauma centers today. The figures that we had from Whitney, 320, she said, injured at St. Vincent's Hospital with 55 critical. That's the latest information we have on that.
Todd McDermott is joining us now in the CBS 2 Information Center with some new info. Todd?
Ernie, Angela, first, it's a name that's been on all our lips since this morning, Osama bin Laden. The U.S. intelligence is now piecing together the case linking bin Laden, that renegade Saudi prince, rich Saudi man, to the unspeakable crimes that have occurred in this country on this day. They come from two different sources: an intercepted communications between two of bin Laden's people and the cell phone calls made from several aircraft in the moments before the crash at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. First, U.S. intelligence intercepted communications between two bin Laden supporters discussing the attacks on the Trade Center and the Pentagon, and that's according to Utah Senator Orrin Hatch. Again, Orrin Hatch says the U.S. intelligence has nailed down this communication. He is the top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee. They also have some interceptive information that included people associated with bin Laden who acknowledged a couple of targets were hit, again, after the fact, saying they had hit some of their targets. Hatch said this in an interview a short time ago. He declined to be more specific. Also, he says law enforcement has data possibly linking one of the people on the flights to bin Laden's organization. Again, government industry officials say at least one flight attendant and two passengers called from 3 of those planes as they were being forced down in New York and in Washington at the Pentagon, each describing similar circumstances. The callers indicated hijackers were armed with knives. In some cases, they actually stabbed flight attendants to control the plane and force them down. As you know, 2 planes struck the World Trade Center. A 3rd plane hit the Pentagon. A 4th plane went down in western Pennsylvania. It's believed that plane was bound for Camp David, the weekend White House in Maryland. Again, it appears the U.S. is piecing together a case linking Osama bin Laden to the terrorist attacks here today on U.S. soil, despite the Taliban in Afghanistan, where bin Laden has been in hiding for some time, being harbored, the U.S. government believes, by the Taliban, denying the fact that bin Laden could possibly have been involved in this wide-ranging terrorist attack. Now, I want to show you some videotape of the aftermath of the attack we are talking about. First, we'll go down to Vesey and Church Street if we can. These are people who are either on the street, who had escaped from the building in the moments after the building's collapse. You are on the street at Vesey and Church. This would have been somewhere between 10 and 10:30. That is followed by what has been described continually as a war zone. Ashen-strewn cars, blazing fires in buildings, people running for cover, people in a panic, crying, many people hurt. I want to add again, these are pictures that we have seen from other countries. We've never seen anything quite like this on U.S. soil. This is video of Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, today, September 11th, 2001. We also have a third tape of the aftermath of what's gone on here. Again, the 2 twin towers, 110 stories each, no longer visible, no longer part of the New York skyline. And more burning cars, more devastation. And again, now there are reports, we may not know for weeks how many casualties actually resulted because of these attacks. Again, that's the aftermath of the scene there. I am told that the streets of Manhattan tonight are more quiet than anyone could possibly imagine. And most of Manhattan is shut down. Ernie, Angela?
It's like a ghost town. Todd, thank you.
Hard to believe what we see. We also have more information in the CBS 2 Information Center. Dana Tyler is standing by with more on that for us. Dana.
Ernie, Angela, as we talk about the city being a ghost town tomorrow, tomorrow the city will be joined by as many as 3,000 National Guard troops will be in New York City tomorrow morning. You remember earlier today, Governor George Pataki giving the order for them to come help. All of the states, New York Army and Air National Guard troops will report to their duty stations. So far, 750 troops have reported to posts in the city. 750 more are expected tonight at the main mission staging area. That's at Stewart Air Force Base in Newburgh, New York. 6 Humvees will also be transported from Syracuse to Newburgh with communications equipment. The governor ordering a full complement of the Guard's equipment: water tankers, cranes, wreckers, loaders, dump trucks. As we've seen already, the city of New York sending dump trucks down to the south end to help with the rescue and the cleanup. Also, the FBI, Attorney General John Ashcroft, it's important to say again, you might have seen this on the CBS News special, him asking anyone with help here, information about the terrorist attacks, to contact the FBI via a new website that's been set up. It has been jammed with hits already, but I will give you the website address: www.ifccfbi.gov. Once again, www.if as in Frank, ccfbi.gov. It is run by the Internet Fraud Complaint Center. 10,000 complaints about consumer fraud last year, but already today it is taking information, helping in the investigation in the tragedy here. And also Todd talked about this, and just more coming in information about phone calls made from the planes. One of the passengers, Barbara Olson, the wife of a top Justice Department official, called her husband as the hijack was happening. Her husband, Solicitor General Theodore Olson, and her saying to her husband that they had knife-like instruments, making all the passengers go to the back of the plane. Also, another plane, a businessman who's been questioned by the FBI, says that his son called his father twice, and that both times the phone was cut off, his son making those frantic calls, that he had said a stewardess had been stabbed. In the second call, the son said the plane was going down. More of these firsthand accounts from people who might have used their cell phones, and again, the search for the black boxes. Ernie, Angela, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dana.
We were looking at some of that incredible video just a short time ago from Todd. To see that, it's so foreign to our eyes on U.S. soil, and it's unimaginable, the devastation, and it's just starting to sink into us right now. Prayer services, Angela, of course, you've been hearing about these prayer services throughout the day.
And actually, I had a friend call me today and tell me she stopped over at St. Patrick's Cathedral to pray. That's where Pablo Guzman is now, and I'm sure you've done your share of praying as well. Pablo.
Actually, at 2 different locations. Earlier today, we were at the New York Blood Center, and normally they have to beg people for donations. Not today. Hundreds of people spontaneously showed up to donate blood, so many that they were overwhelmed and began giving out tickets for people to return tomorrow. However, if you have type O or type O negative, you are asked to come because you will be rushed to the top of the line, as there is an acute need for those particular blood types. Now, as you said, 5:30 this evening, there was a special service here at St. Patrick's, presided over by the Cardinal himself, offering comfort and compassion. The Archdiocese always stands with the city in a time of crisis, but there was a particular feeling here because the Archdiocese lost a long-time chaplain of the fire department who was killed in the World Trade Center towers. You are about to hear 2 different voices that together capture perhaps most of the conflicting emotions that New Yorkers are feeling right now. First, the Cardinal, he quotes from the Gospel according to St. John, when Christ had to comfort the disciples who were scared when he told them that he had to go now and pay the ultimate sacrifice. They were scared. He said, "Be not afraid, have courage." The other voice is an angrier one, a man on his way into the service at St. Patrick's, the former mayor of New York, Ed Koch. First, Cardinal Egan.
We are not afraid. We are a courageous people. We're in the hands of our God, and we're a strong and good people. Fear is not part of our experience today.
you're saying don't treat this as an isolated act, treat this as an act of war.
It is an act of war. What else would you call those who send planes to destroy buildings in which innocent civilians, 50,000 of them, are working, and then even attack the White House and the Pentagon? That's an act of war.
Now, I have been in touch throughout the day with the investigators that I've talked with in the past who covered the first World Trade Center bombing, the Oklahoma City bombing, and this investigation. And there's a few things that they're looking at. One, that the team that were involved here, they had people who knew how to fly those planes. That tells them something. Also, how coordinated this was, that there had to be at least a year of planning in this, maybe more, going back to when the Millennium blasts that were planned fizzled, did not materialize. And also that what happened here does have its roots in the Middle East, and that what happened here, you can't try to rationalize or figure this out logically, they say. You have to deal with people who are coming from an entirely different place, who have been at war all along, and that the inner circle of the Bush administration, the people that I talked to who are talking with Washington, whatever may be said publicly, diplomatically in the beginning, they were treating this as an act of war. Pablo Guzman, CBS 2. Back to you.
Okay, Pablo, thank you for that wrap-up tonight from St. Patrick's Cathedral and more.
Now we want to get more on this whole situation. We have a terrorism expert with us now, Mika Halpern. Mika is America Online's Israel columnist. He's researched terrorism extensively and frequently lectures on the topic. Mika, appreciate you being with us. As a matter of fact, you're here visiting relatives. You live in Jerusalem.
Exactly.
The question I've been asking all day, and I'm so glad you're here, is how in the world could this happen to the largest, greatest superpower to ever exist? What happened to our intelligence and our counterintelligence? How come we didn't know this was going to happen?
Well, the first reason why it happened is because America is a great democracy, and it preserves and embraces freedom. And as a result, a tremendous amount can happen under the noses of democracy. The other reason how it could happen is fundamentally the United States is a target of terror, because it does not agree with the essence of fundamentalist Islam.
So you're saying this is not about our supporting Israel. This is a much larger issue.
Yes, it is absolutely not about the United States' support for Israel. It's rather about who the United States is. The United States represents freedom, democracy, equality for all people. It represents a Satan, ultimately, to fundamentalism.
Mika, talk to us today now about the mindset of the terrorist, this incredible coordinated effort as to what happened today. How do you see it?
Thousands of pieces had to be brought together in order for this to happen today. Imagine two planes coming from completely different places, entering into the same airspace, hitting nearly the same target, but specifically two different places right next to one another. Not even to mention a Pentagon attack and another attack directed towards Camp David. All symbols. Symbols are very important. But terror itself is not suicide from the point of view of the fundamentalist Islamic perspective.
It's martyrdom.
Martyrdom is essential, and martyrdom is embraced. It's heroic. It's something they can be proud of. It's something that can be passed on to, and their families can bask in the limelight.
Who are these people? This has to be a well-orchestrated, well-organized group, because, as you said, the choreography was unbelievable.
That's exactly what it is. It's a greased machine. It's not a single individual. It's a mistake to assume it is. It's tremendous movements, and movements working together. It's movements of intelligence. It's movements of apparatuses, things that are integrated and interwoven. It's also has to require specific knowledge.
I also wanted to ask you about reaction. Now, we heard earlier reports about a possible U.S. attack in Afghanistan, and earlier tonight a senior U.S. official said it was not. Your take, you're a journalist, you live in Jerusalem, you have a real sense of what goes on, and also now you're here witnessing what's happened. Exactly. What do you make of this Afghanistan situation?
Well, I can say that it's very, very important that the United States respond. As to whether or not they responded in Afghanistan, I can't speak to, because none of us know the specifics. What I can say is that it is essential that the United States realize that they're targets, and the only way of responding is to identify the people who are perpetrators and to find them. Ultimately, if not, they become easy targets and victims throughout the world.
What do you think the president will say tonight?
I would hope that he would support the Americans, the people themselves, give them a pep talk, and plead to them not to be afraid. If terrorism wins, Americans become afraid. Terrorism will only succeed if people don't go out to Lower Manhattan, if people don't go traveling, if people don't go around. They must continue their normal lifestyle.
But do you agree the U.S. must strike back immediately, if not sooner?
They have to find the perpetrators and strike back. You see, in Israel today, people are saying, we told you so. We told you so.
Mika Halpern, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to keep going here. We'll jump back to Todd McDermott with more information and an update for us. Todd.
Ernie, I think the first thing we want to do is tell you what is going on nationwide as well as in the city as far as cancellations go. Some of that information is on your screen there. You will see more, but we want to point out, first of all, that schools are closed. Both schools in the New York City Archdiocese, Catholic schools are closed, as well as public schools are closed. Right now, on its website, New York City Public Schools are considering whether to close schools on Thursday as well. Again, we want to point out again, schools will not be open tomorrow. But this goes far beyond New York. The nation itself will in many ways shut down for much of the week because of what's happened here in New York and at the Pentagon today. Among the cancellations, you know, the Latin Grammys, the Emmy Awards. The Emmy Awards for Sunday have been canceled. Also, Major League Baseball, I'm sure you probably know if you're a baseball fan, canceled games for the first time since 1945, the day of the death of FDR. Also, the NFL is discussing whether or not to actually play games this coming Sunday. The NCAA is considering, and publicly is saying, they are